All right, good morning, everyone. Kyle Nelson here from the Colorado Virtual Operations Support Team. I'm the training coordinator here for Covost, and I'd like to welcome everyone this morning to the March 2018 edition of the monthly training seminars that we do here for the Colorado Virtual Operations Support Team. Thanks to all of you that are joining us live this morning, and those of you catching the recording coming up in the near future. But we wanted to go ahead and kick things off here by just saying thanks everyone for a great start to 2018. We had a very well attended January training, kind of laid out an overview for what the plan is for training and things, and kind of an update for the team for 2018. If you haven't caught that yet, go ahead and check out the Covost YouTube channel, and that's all on there. All our past recordings are on there. In addition to that, go ahead and make sure you've caught up on all the historic trainings as well. If you want to refresh on any topics, those are always there and available for you to view. To kick things off this morning, just a couple of team announcements. Mickey doesn't have anything, she told me. So I just wanted to update the team that there was a really good presentation that I delivered at the Colorado Emergency Management Association conference just a few weeks back down in Colorado Springs. It was very well attended. There were some great questions and also some great interest in our team, as well as what we do and what services we can provide to state and local agencies at no cost here in Colorado. It was really interesting to hear as well some of the fanfare around our potential, what ended up not panning out, but our potential EMAC, or Emergency Management Assistance Compact request to support Puerto Rico and other areas affected by the hurricanes last season. And it was pretty eye-opening that a state asset could be so widely shared and also so widely capable. So people are really looking at us both here in Colorado and abroad. So just know that we're doing some great things here. We have a wonderful and amazing team, and I'm really looking forward to keeping that going and growing that team on into the future. And as part of that presentation, we also did a little bit of talk about what the training program looks like, kind of how the recruitment works, some of the things that our members can bring to the table, the amazing talents that we have. So thanks everyone for helping to make that presentation a success with all your contributions and expertise that you lend on a regular basis. And the presentation is linked there below my name under the announcements section. So please feel free to check out that slide deck, share it around. If people are wondering what we're all about, that's another great slide deck that you can provide to folks or agencies that are interested in just who we are and what we do. Moving on from there, our next meeting will be Friday, April 20 at 9 a.m. Mountain Time, same time, same place. And from there, we'll be taking a look at a quick overview of and a refresher of Slack and our Covost workbook, kind of how those tools work, some updates that have been made. So don't miss that one. Whether you're an existing member, you've been around since the inception of Covost, or if you're kind of coming on board here relatively recently, please tune into that presentation. You won't want to miss it, to make sure that we're all keeping our skills sharp so that should that activation request come in, we can be ready to jump in very, very quickly. So that's all I have for announcements. I know Mickey will jump in if she has anything here. And of course, if anyone wants to chime in, we have the audio conference line going parallel to this. So I'm listening in one ear to that, in the other ear to what's coming through on the computer side of things through the presentation. So also monitoring the text chats in the training channel on Slack, and also on our live streaming YouTube link. So go ahead, drop your messages, questions, things in there. You have all sorts of ways to get a hold of me. So please feel free to jump in and be engaged throughout this training process. So jumping in today, we're going to talk about Nextdoor. And Nextdoor is a platform that has been requested by several of our members to kind of take a look at, what is Nextdoor and how it's being used, both on the personal side as well as the agency side, as well as looking at ways that we could monitor on Nextdoor, as well as some of the, and I'll be straight with you all, the significant monitoring challenges that exist with regard to Nextdoor monitoring and searching for information. And as we'll step through this, and kind of the battle rhythm for this morning is talking about how Nextdoor is, and I'm doing air quotes, you just can't see me, a private social network. We'll talk about some privacy concerns that folks have with that platform, as well as how to address them and how to keep you, our members, and as well as your family safe if you're operating and using Nextdoor. We'll briefly explore some uses for public safety agencies. I unfortunately do not have access to a public safety facing Nextdoor account, so I can't show you what that dashboard looks like. I'm sure many of our members may have access to that, so if you do have specific questions about that, I can put you in contact with those members that can answer those Nextdoor agency specific questions. And then finally, I'll touch on some takeaways for us as the VOST, as well as limitations for information gathering when it comes to searching and monitoring on Nextdoor. And to give a shout out to Nathan Hoonerwaddle, this is something that he always did, and something that I always like to continue, is that I'm going to be doing kind of a live demo and a demonstration, a walkthrough of Nextdoor using my personal Nextdoor account. So it's real-time training. We're always learning, and I cannot fully control what shows up on the screen. And just know that that disclaimer is out there, but I'll do my best to make sure that it all stays kosher and everything's all correct and whatnot, so that I can keep operating in this wonderful, wonderful position as your training coordinator. So I'm just going to scroll down here in the agenda. You can follow along if you'd like. The agenda link is in the training channel on Slack. So go ahead and jump in there and check it out. And so I'd like to start by talking about Nextdoor as a private social network. And I like that's how they like to market themselves. However, Nextdoor, in one sense they do, but also they really don't care about your privacy, right? You can share as much information as you would like to share on their platform, and they give you the ability to do so. Now, what's really nice is that Nextdoor also gives you ways to adjust your privacy settings to control what you share with other people on the platform. So I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to jump over now to the live view of Nextdoor using my personal account. So just bear with me as I switch screens here. Okay, we've swapped over. This is my Nextdoor dashboard that I see when I log in here. And so as soon as I log in, and when I joined Nextdoor, when I signed up for it, I joined a neighborhood. And that's what Nextdoor kind of uses. It's these virtual neighborhoods whose boundaries are drawn by folks that have either started, or they're the first in the area to create a neighborhood, or perhaps they've drawn another neighborhood or geographic boundary within, say, to create a smaller subset of, say, like a subdivision or something of that nature. The map in the upper right-hand corner, that is the neighborhood that is drawn to encompass the cities of Elgibel, Basalt, Old Snowmass, as well as the valley along which Highway 82 runs in the Roaring Fork Valley up where I live here in the mountains of Colorado. And that's admittedly, that's a fairly large geographic zone. Some of you may have some that are much, much smaller, but we're quite rural out here, so we can have some of those bigger geographic zones. And so when I join that community, before I do so, there needs to be some type of verification. And with Nextdoor, each neighbor, as you are called, each neighbor or person that joins must somehow verify their address and also must use their real name. And this is something that really differs Nextdoor from other platforms that are out there, where there's a little bit more transparency and you can't be so much of a you can't be so anonymous on these platforms. So it's very much a virtual community that's being built within your physical neighborhood. Just wanted to touch on the privacy settings here, and I have links in our agenda that would show you how to hide street numbers, what information that you show. And so if you wanted to do that, just to show as an example, if you're logged in, I'm using the desktop version. They also have a mobile app that's really useful. If I go under my profile and my settings, can head into here, and here's where I can see and when I can get notified, as well as if I clicked on privacy, this privacy tab here, straight top center of the screen. If I clicked on that, that would show what information I share with other neighbors or members of my community on Nextdoor. So go ahead, check through it the same way that we advocate for you to check and update your Facebook privacy settings and on other social media platforms. Make sure that if you're using these platforms, or even if you just went and created an account and then forgot about it, double check what information is out there and is being shared, perhaps without you even knowing. Sometimes if these platforms go through updates or an update cycle, they will actually, they may reset some of these privacy settings that you thought were permanently set. So it's always a good idea, go back, check out those privacy settings, and then that will give you a good look at what you're sharing, and you can set your level of engagement that way. So in the agenda, there's a few other links to things, such as an intro video for Nextdoor. I'm not going to put that out over the video here. You can go ahead and view that at your leisure. It's a good quick overview of the platform from the makers of it. So I won't go ahead and put that on, but I do want to touch a little bit more on the nearby neighborhoods and things. And that's something that you saw that is in the settings, and there's nearby neighborhoods. So there are some nearby neighborhoods or areas that are drawn within the Nextdoor platform that border the neighborhood or the physical area in which you live online. And so those nearby neighborhoods allow you to, if you turn those settings on, that you can view information that's in those nearby neighborhoods and communicate with members in those nearby neighborhoods when you are creating discussions and things in the platform. So if you were to say, go and you had a topic or something to share, you could post a message, share an event, create a poll, or perhaps you can even send an urgent alert. And yes, that's citizens using the platform that can send this alert out. And when you're communicating on the platform for Nextdoor, this is where you can also get into some additional tweaking and some demonstrations here. So you can say, okay, what category is it? So it's starting to look a little bit more structured, similar to how Facebook categorizes things, right? It says, okay, what category is this? How do I classify what you're talking about? So for example, if it was just a general post for a demonstration here, I could say a general post. I could say, well, who do I want to see that? Is it the neighbors in my local neighborhood, my Mid-Valley / Basalt neighborhood? Or do I want to expand that out to my neighborhood and those that are nearby? Put a subject in, a message. You can add photos and other digital media content. You can share that information there. You can also create community events, polls, but the urgent alert is the one that I think really sets Nextdoor apart from a lot of these other platforms, where when you send this, if you do send it, everyone in your neighborhood will immediately receive a push notification of the alert that you're sending via the email address they registered with and or SMS text message using the phone number on their account. And so this is something designed to be used in a truly life-threatening situation that neighbors in your neighborhood, people, would need to know about. And one thing to note is that this is it's kind of interesting. It kind of almost mirrors some of the other alerting platforms that are currently out there for public safety agencies, and that there's a significant character limit. Limit your urgent alert to 110 characters, it says. So this is going to be the initial message that gets pushed out, 110 characters. So if it is something that you're pushing out, you really need to be cognizant of how you're crafting and how you're wording that message if you are sharing that information. Or if people are sharing information with you, they can't really include a lot of details, so you might need to get this alert first and then slide over and check out and start doing some searching on your own on other social media platforms to determine just what in fact is going on. So that's a quick little overview of some of the content that you can post and share as an individual on there. And as you scroll through, you'll see that it shows how many neighbors are currently active in your neighborhood here in the upper right. And it shows you a percentage. You know, here, only about 5% of the almost 4,000 households are on the platform. And that's pretty consistent. A lot of folks out here. This is, like I said, a rural area. Most people have some second homes out here. And the population is also very transient. And I mean that in a way that they come in and they're seasonal workers in nature. Also here on the left-hand side, we can find some different categories, and all those categories that you saw for the posts, this is how you can start to filter out and see your news feed really kind of condensed down, and you can look for recommendations that people have put out there, whether that's restaurants or all these different categories that they have out here as well. It's something that you can explore, especially if you're in a more populated area. Some of you may use Google reviews and other recommendations that way, but Nextdoor is a good way to get some more transparent reviews because, again, it's a verified person at a physical address using their real name. So a lot of people are less likely to post some of those outrageous reviews, if you will, as compared to our other review platforms that are out there. Similar to Facebook and other social media platforms, there's a for sale area where people can buy and swap and trade all kinds of fun and interesting things that are out there. It's always fun to pick through that, see if you can score some good deals. So just know that that's out there, and then many other things as well. But the crime and safety one is one that you can look at, and that one in our area at least, not super active. However, we do border Forest Service and Bureau of Land Management land, and so we'll have bears and mountain lions and all kinds of things coming through, and people will post those things in there just to let other neighbors know. Perhaps, hey, secure your trash, keep small animals and pets inside, just so that we don't have any negative consequences if we should get a visit from those wild animals in the area. So all kinds of things that you can search for and look for on there, but the thing that really is kind of a challenge when it comes to the Nextdoor platform is that you're limited in the amount of information that you can see and search for to within your community and your neighboring, your neighborhood and the nearby neighborhoods. So it's not it's not an open platform. It's not like Twitter where everything you post is public. It's very much permission and community centric. And that can absolutely be a challenge for us. We'll circle back to that just a little bit later, but the public safety agency side of things, this is something that I encourage you, if you or someone who you work with is a member of a public safety agency and they're in a public facing role, such as public information, public affairs, insert title here, that where they're doing community outreach and engagement, it's a really good way to connect with communities, because public safety agencies, they can post messages, they can put polls out, and even send urgent alerts to neighborhoods within their jurisdiction or service area, as it's called. And the huge takeaway from that is nowhere in there did I say that they can read and monitor the conversations. right? It's a dissemination tool and an engagement tool, but it's only messages that that public agency posts, the polls that they send out, the urgent alerts that they can push out. That's where they can drive that engagement, but it does not give them access to all the individual conversations that are happening within those communities as well. So they can't see your profile, they can't see the content from your neighborhood, just their own posts and replies to those posts. So the Nextdoor website, as it exists, is truly private to you and your neighbors in your Nextdoor neighborhood. And just for example, up here, in full transparency, the public agency, the one that's actually the most active, that's being pushed out here in our area, is Colorado Department of Public Health and Environment, CDPHE, is pushing out some things here. They've done some great community engagement. And there's also, you can click on here and see what agencies are active in the area. Unfortunately, none of our local law, fire, EMS agencies are, but hopefully that can get turned around. I'm sure those of you that live in more populated areas will see a greater number of agencies that are listed, not just a statewide agency, but your local agencies as well. And it just provides another great conduit to connect with your local public safety folks on a platform that people may trust more than, say, other digital media platforms like Facebook, Twitter, and others. They may feel more comfortable connecting with them here. And also those public agencies can push things out as well. There's some great examples that I wanted to highlight. One of those was from Jefferson County, Colorado. They did a great job of pushing out some, excuse me, they did a great job of pushing out some messaging and some information regarding a flood event that was going on. Excuse me, Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, a flood event that was going on. So I'll just show a quick example of what that could look like and drag this over to this screen here. Let me swap screens, stand by one. Okay, so here's an example of the city of Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, who's on Nextdoor. And this is a message that they put out to their citizens within their area. All the Nextdoor neighborhoods that exist within their jurisdiction, they communicated that there was some possible flooding due to heavy rainfall the weekend following February 22nd of this year. And so they gave a quick update from the director of communications for the city, highlighted some content that was given by the fire chief, as well as looking at, hey, what should I now do? So it's it's specific, it's timely, it gives some action items for the residents. And then where can I go for more information? Where can I get more preparedness info? And that's linked there right in that message. So that's an example of how a city or an agency can communicate or push that information out to the citizens within the areas that they're responsible for on the Nextdoor platform. So it's another conduit to connect with and prepare and engage your community in the online digital space. So I wanted to highlight that example. I thought that was a really good one. And it's also one that is a very real, very near and dear to our hearts in Colorado. And given how things are going here so far this spring with our below normal snowpacks and things and below normal precipitation in our mountain areas and really statewide, we're looking at perhaps an active wildfire season. So maybe a good time to get on Nextdoor and connect with your local public safety agencies to make sure that you can receive the alerts there. And if you're not, encourage your local agencies to get on Nextdoor, and those are linked right in here in the uses for public safety agencies, and you can check that out here using this link. So now looking at some uses for individuals here on Nextdoor. It's sharing hyperlocal information. Some of the different tabs and things that I showed you all with getting recommendations, local recommendations, not from people that have come in and visited your community from afar, but what locals think. Services, restaurants, places of business, the service industry that's there for contractors and such. You can look at recommendations locally from real verified people. Some agencies will put events out there. Individuals may post events for you to join within your Nextdoor neighborhood. You can connect with your community members there, and everything from buy, sell, and trade. And another thing that Nextdoor does is you can actually create community groups with common interest. Nextdoor is very popular with neighborhood watch groups, as well as with community emergency response teams, sports teams, other community active organizations, volunteer organizations that are within your community, Boy Scout troops, venturing crews, explorer posts, and things, all have used Nextdoor to create their online digital community and to help market what the services and things that they provide to the community at large. And those Nextdoor groups can be public or private, again, kind of Facebook-ish, but those public ones are ones that anyone in that community on Nextdoor can join. The private groups are by invitation only. So just know that those are out there, that those exist, and that's where conversations can be taking place. So I wanted to just kind of step back here for just a few seconds and open it up. If anyone out there, other uses for Nextdoor that you have personally done or seen, happy to have you share your experiences here today as well. All right, feel free to jump in and share those, either the text chat on our phone conference line or in the training channel on Slack. Happy to include those in there, links to how your agencies have used Nextdoor, as well as how you may have used Nextdoor as an individual. So I wanted to also touch on some of our takeaways and limitations for the platform. To summarize, it's a powerful, highly localized tool, but it has some significant monitoring limitations, as we've touched on and built on throughout this session here. Nextdoor can be very beneficial for information gathering as to what's happening in a community, perhaps in advance of or following a pre-planned event or disaster that occurs, if that member lives in and is registered within the affected Nextdoor neighborhood. And that's the big asterisk that I'll place on this. I should make this asterisk bigger. Maybe I'll bold it. I'll bold it. Okay. Big, bold asterisk. That's not impressive. So this asterisk is if you live there, because I cannot, as an individual, search and monitor in other neighborhoods very easily at all. And that is a significant takeaway when we're looking as a virtual operations support team for open source, real-time information that is open, free, searchable, and accessible to anyone. So unless something is happening in a member's Nextdoor neighborhood and they choose to log onto that platform and look at the conversations that are happening, we really, our hands are tied. It's really tough to monitor on that platform. But if you are in that affected neighborhood, it can be it can be a true treasure trove of information. And it can get very hyper local to saying, hey, these conversations are happening within this geographic boundary. Remember those maps that we looked at that showed what our Nextdoor neighborhood, for example, looks like. And so those agencies that are responsible and have jurisdiction in those neighborhood areas, you can start to see, hey, if there are conversations happening, say in a particular area, I'll swap over and show this. If they're happening in that particular area and those conversations are increasing, say in one part of a neighborhood or another, those in real time, we can start to say, hey, maybe you want to start focusing some efforts over in this area as opposed to perhaps on the other side of this neighborhood or in another place in the valley, in the city, or in the area in which you live. So just understand that there's a very positive side to this. It can provide some great hyper-local information. Another huge benefit, it's real people sharing the information as well. So it's verified individuals at those verified addresses within those neighborhoods as they're drawn digitally on the Nextdoor platform. So it's not people that can create fake or nefarious accounts and provide false information and kind of spam a hashtag or other things like that, like on other platforms, but it's very much hyper-local, and it's being given, that information is being given by real people. But to continue on some of the limitations, I haven't found a true ruling on this, and some journalists I know have gotten in trouble for this, where they've infiltrated Nextdoor neighborhoods, or they've contacted people, hey, are you on Nextdoor? I heard there's some information going on. And they've actually gotten in trouble for taking and sharing screenshots of posts or content that are within a specific Nextdoor neighborhood, because those individuals, those journalists, reporters, or other folks may not, they're not members of that neighborhood, so they violate the Nextdoor privacy policy. It's also, it's not easily searchable other than by users that are registered on the platform and in that neighborhood. And something to keep in mind as well, from an agency perspective and also a monitoring perspective, those neighborhoods, they're defined by the users. There are people, there are leadership, people that originally created those neighborhood boundaries as they were drawn. That's not done by a public safety agency, not your geographic information systems department or IT department's information technology. That's done by individuals. So I've heard stories where a neighborhood that you're in and you share, say, you border a fence line of your neighbor's backyard, you look across and you see your neighbor's backyard. Well, that fence line may be a physical boundary between you and your neighbor, but because of how your Nextdoor neighborhood was drawn, there's a boundary now between you and the neighbor that you share a physical backyard with. You are in completely separate Nextdoor neighborhoods, even though you can look right across the yard and probably into their windows if you really wanted to. So there are some different, there are some limitations to that as well. Sir. Hey, Sandy, go ahead. Okay, so Sandy, I'm just going to relay for the folks that are on the other line here. You talked about the nearby neighborhoods and the information that we'll see there, and we'll definitely touch on that. And also, we'll talk about the I've moved feature in Nextdoor that where people can actually change their address within the Nextdoor platform if they do indeed move. So thank you for bringing both of those up. The nearby neighborhoods, I know I did touch on that briefly, but you are absolutely correct in that if the users choose to share and make their content viewable by those in the nearby neighborhoods, you stated you have about 36 of them. I wish I had a few more in my area, but we're a little bit more remote up here, and we're a little bit limited in the demonstration. However, that brings up a great point in that you can see in a more populated area where Nextdoor is more active, you can often see the content and the conversations that are happening in your nearby neighborhoods or neighborhoods on Nextdoor that border the Nextdoor neighborhood that you are part of. And so that's absolutely true. It's not just limited to your neighborhood, but if people give the permission for others to see what they post, which most people would, we typically assume, is that we can start to see that larger conversation that's happening not just within our next door neighborhood, but the neighborhoods surrounding us as well. And then to touch on the I've moved feature, at the beginning we touched on that Nextdoor relies on a user to verify their physical address somehow. And I know, Sandy, you were hinting at that there may be some potential workarounds to saying that you have moved to a new area or to a new address, and if that address perhaps were to exist in that new physical neighborhood, that you could perhaps move neighborhoods on Nextdoor. I have not explored that in depth, so I can't speak to that exactly. Have you had experience with that, Sandy, or have you heard from others that have done that? Okay, so when Sandy moved, he moved to a new neighborhood, put his new address into Nextdoor, and he didn't have to re-verify his new address. Oh, so it's okay. It's instantaneous that you can do that. That's something I knew that was a feature that did exist, but I wasn't aware of perhaps that some of those checks were not in place for your for the new residents that you have. So that's interesting. That's another perhaps we can throw that under kind of an asterisk on that as well. Some of the limitations that people may kind of jump neighborhoods saying that they've perhaps moved, especially if, say, you have a property on Nextdoor and you can see it on the map. If you zoom in, you can see these properties that have not been registered with Nextdoor. So there may be potential opportunities for folks to exploit those. So again, use with caution, but Sandy, I really appreciate you bringing those points up from the nearby neighborhoods, information that we can gather there, as well as some of the perhaps checks and balances that are not quite as robust as we would hope they would be when it comes to folks moving neighborhoods. And another thing, people that also have second residences, that is also an option for folks to register a second residence on Nextdoor, like a second home, rental property, whatever it might be. The only thing is that you have to use a different email address. But if you can, receive mail or somehow verify that you are a resident at a second location, as long as you have a second email address to create a second Nextdoor account, you can create that as well. So those options are out there. And what I've found a little bit in my Nextdoor neighborhood up here in the mountains is that a lot of people that have vacation properties are here 6 months out of the year. Like in the summertime, the other 6 months they're somewhere down south. And so they're registered on Nextdoor, but they're not always physically here in the area that they're registered. So just to kind of round things out here, and again, thanks to Sandy and Mickey for their insight, their contributions here today. Some of the tips that I want to share for our use with Colorado Virtual Operations Support Team. And if there is an incident or an event that's ongoing or evolving in an area, if a member would so choose, they can indicate if they are in a Nextdoor neighborhood that is part of our mission area. If that member would choose to do so, they could perhaps search and monitor in the background with that information that's being shared there on that platform. Not necessarily having to engage in that community online, but the member could kind of hang back, could be a lurker, monitor, however you'd like to call it, in the background, and essentially observe the conversations and relay them accordingly. Again, documentation and things as we do. The only thing is that we wouldn't be able to view that publicly, that content publicly, so that would require some archival on our end with regard to monitoring and listening for that information and capturing that information per our protocols. And still using our traditional reporting and escalation process, still letting the team lead or Mickey for that activation know what's happening, what's being discussed, if it's meeting the criteria and the mission that we were given by those local agencies that requested us. And one thing that I've found in my use of this is that look at if other posts in the neighborhood appear to be from the same person, if it starts looking at the same topic, if we're observing trends, and those trends are of question for us, that might be something we want to dig a little bit deeper into and explore outside of just the Nextdoor platform. And finally, the takeaway, maintaining your own personal security and anonymity to an extent. Just be wary of asking questions or for additional information. Remember, we are strictly a monitoring entity. We're not necessarily doing any type of engagement or any type of information and intelligence gathering from a law enforcement perspective. That's done by other agencies here in the state. We're monitoring only. So that's just a couple of takeaways, a quick overview of the platform of Nextdoor, looking at what it can be used for, kind of what the structure of that platform is, some pros and cons to using it as an individual and as agencies, and finally, some challenges that poses for us as a virtual operations support team when it comes to monitoring and looking for information on the Nextdoor platform. Are there any final thoughts, Sandy or Mickey? So Mickey's saying that there's several law enforcement agencies that are using Nextdoor from a law enforcement public safety perspective. And there are also significant limitations with us monitoring as a VOST. So there may be platforms that this may be platforms that we have to evaluate in real time and see, does it make our priority list for that particular activation? No. Yeah, absolutely. And that's a great point, Mickey, is it may not be the best tool for us for a particular activation, but we have to evaluate that in real time. And also that it may also be more beneficial as opposed to a larger group monitoring tool. It's good for a personal situational awareness tool and monitoring what's happening in your local community in advance of a potential activation if you're on Nextdoor in a community that's being affected. And it can be a good source of information, but of course, some of those limitations definitely do exist. So this has been a fun one. I hope that everyone finds this training beneficial and poke around, explore on the Nextdoor platform. I encourage you to join your Nextdoor neighborhood and connect with folks there. It's a really good platform, and it's also a great way to share hyperlocal and get hyperlocal information. There's a link to Google Trends if you'd like to explore what's happening, what's current within Nextdoor. However, to round things out here as we we're approaching the top of the hour, please indicate whether you've attended the live training here this morning, or if you're viewing the recorded session in our March meeting workbook for COVOST, and that's linked both in Slack as well as in our training agenda that was sent out on Slack as well. And please log your time for today's training as well. We want to make sure to log the hours that all of you are putting in to help grow your skills as well as the team as well. It's extremely beneficial to be able to have those hours, and so that you can get credit for the time that you're giving and that you're donating and sharing with us, as well as we can then take that up the chain and keep growing the team and advocating for more resources for us as we continue to increase our capability. So final thoughts here from myself. Thank you everyone so much for attending this morning, viewing the recording if that's what you're doing here later on. Everyone have a great rest of your weekend, whenever you choose to, whenever you're viewing this recording. And we'll see you April 20 at 9 a.m. Mountain Time for Slack and the CoVost workbook overview refresher. We'll get into some of the nitty gritty on that. So if there's nothing else, we'll go ahead and sign off. All right, thanks everyone for a great training.